My name's Jonny Smith and I'm going to be riding Honda's smallest, rarest motorbike to see Honda's smallest, rarest car. Thanks ever so much for watching my first video on CarPervert. The comments were wonderful, I can't quite believe it. Today, it's not strictly CarPervert, is it? No, it's motorbike and CarPervert. I wanted to show you guys this. I have a little bit of a thing for folding small motorbikes that fit in the boot of cars. I've owned a lot. Most of them have been Honda. Why? I guess because Honda really captured the imagination back in the 1960s with what became known as the monkey bike. But it started with something called the Z100 and then became this, the CZ100. So this is like the godfather of the monkey bike. I know my first video was a Honda and my second video is a Honda. Don't worry, Honda are not paying me. I just thought it would follow on from the thing that I showed you, the Honda E, and it's incredibly small. Just to give you an idea of scale, there is the wheel, and there's my foot, okay? And it's a road legal motorbike. This bike has always been the holy grail of monkey bikes for me. I've had ST50s, ST70s, which are a much more rideable grown-up monkey bike. So yeah, I guess my Honda journey started a long time, actually back in the 80s when I was a kid, and I rode the what would have been the Z50R, which is the monkey bike that most of us remember, around a school fete or a country show. Razzed it a bit hard. I actually went straight over the handlebars and I got a proper bollocking from my mum. But I remember that bike. It was red, it had the Honda wing sticker on the tank. I remember it being just spectacular and good quality and quite quick. Because remember, this is not a fully automatic bike. This is a 3-speed clutchless manual box. So you can actually go through the gears and get that feeling. Believe it or not, in immaculate condition, these are selling for about 12 to 15,000 pounds now, which seems ludicrous for such a small thing, but they're almost an ornament. This is the very first vehicle I've ever owned where my wife looked at it and she went, that would look really nice in the house. And I'm like, hold that thought. What I love about these is they were really popular pit bikes for a lot of race teams. So you see archive photos of racing, race cars, Formula One, pits like that. And you see a lot of the old Honda Monkeys as the bikes they used to just tool around in. And of course you could just lift them up, put them into the back of a truck. I think this weighs about 54 kilos, which is actually quite heavy for in today's terms, but one person can lift it up and lift it into the boot of a car, which I do regularly. But today I'm going to actually ride this bike on a road trip. When I say road trip, it's not a massive road trip in today's terms, about 12 miles. But 12 miles on this, in today's traffic, doesn't sound a lot, but you get an awful lot of fun from a tiny little thing. And you know what, I could take an electric bike. This is the Moto Chimp, and I will do another video on the Moto Chimp. This is a great product that I've championed for a while from Singapore. However, my Moto Chimp is not yet road registered, so when this is registered, I'm going to do a couple more vids on it. And this is full electric and a wonderful little thing, kind of pays homage to the old guys. Now, Honda didn't really invent small bikes per se, but what Honda did is made small bikes premium. Bought this in 2011, 2012 time, after looking for a long while, and this bike was owned by a dwarf actor, a British dwarf actor called Mick Walters, nicknamed Big Mick, who's been in numerous films playing smaller parts, and he was even in Blackadder, the comedy series Blackadder, which I absolutely loved. He used it as his everyday transport, and he said, I couldn't ride a normal motorbike and I couldn't drive a normal car back in the late 60s, early 70s, so this was his everyday transport. My particular bike has been repainted and semi-restored over the years, and that's because Mick painted it bright yellow in about 1971. I've got a photo actually, let me go and get it. So there's Mick on my bike, well his bike, in about 1970, and he put a big seat on the back and he actually put a whippy aerial with a flag on the top. And the reason why he did all of that is because of visibility, so people just didn't see me. I'm sat down here on a bike going through traffic in Yorkshire or London, which is where he was based, and it was, you know, a bit risky. Like I said before, the Z100 is the very first monkey bike, but the Z100 had this weird little white tank and it kind of looks like a prototype. This has a bit of elegance to it, and I think this bike, I think this is a more desirable bike. So you've got Beautiful packaging here. Like I said, no suspension, so hard front, hard back, no shocks at all. This loop steel frame, solid cast aluminium hubs, back brake here, front brake there. You can see these controls are from the Super Cub bike, which was the bike that made Honda, which mobilized the masses, still does, with this engine. The overhead valve, 49cc, 4.4 brake horsepower, 10,000 RPM. Little chicken chaser. That engine has spawned so many stories, so many people's inspiration. I had a field bike, or we all had a couple of field bikes, which were cut down Honda Cubs when you were kids. This engine has a lot to answer for. It's an absolute legend. It's worth an episode on its own, so I will do that in the future. This little beautiful silencer which goes through underneath the seat and then out to the tailpipe on this side. Down here, there's obviously the carburetor and the horn. Now these bikes, although a lot of people in Europe bought them as pit bikes and field bikes for their kids, a lot of fun fairs bought them and bolted them down onto merry-go-rounds for kids to play on. So I've seen some come up for sale over the years that have never been on the road. They've been used as fun fair ornaments, which is a bit weird. But they always came with a light, front and back. They always came with a horn, so you could always put them on the road. Honda made sure it looked novelty, but this was a proper engineered bike. The very first CZ100s are called white tank models, and they have white painted tank instead of red. Still got the chrome, beautiful chrome side portions with your rubber knee grips, and then they've got no speedo on the top, I think. So no speedo on the top of the light unit here. That's a gallon of petrol. How much fun can you have using that, or half of that, or quarter of that on a lovely Saturday like this? Well, this is probably going to use about £1 worth of fuel today, and I'm probably going to get more grins and more looks than many, many more expensive, glamorous, bigger engine vehicles, and I think that's what this is about, right? You can have an awful lot of fun on a tiny bit of fuel. Anyway, I'll keep talking about this while we're riding. I'm going to take this little midget to see my other little midget, which is the Honda S600 Coupe. Both 1965 Hondas, both peak Honda in terms of mad, quirky engineering, really, and both exceptionally rare now. Bizarrely, because it's so small and low, it's much easier to kneel down when I'm actually trying to start it. So turn it on, fuel tap on, and then onto choke. It's so micro. You can hardly choke. Gonna tickle the carb. Oh, where is it? There, gonna tickle that. So I haven't been on this bike for about a year. Don't use it a great deal. Yesterday, I took it to my brother's workshop, my brother Greg, who works on vintage cars most of the time. And we gave it a going through. We took the carb off, checked it, and we gave it some adjustments.
So we tried 12 thou. Oh, look at that. Look at that, 12 thou.
So it's been over-tightened with an old O-ring.
I would say even the wrong size O-ring. That's the only place it's touching.
The two outer ears.
Yeah. How bent that flange was.
Yeah. Well, we've all seen a bent flange.
Yeah.
And now it actually is running much better than it was before. Let's start it. Bit of fuel coming out, that's okay. It's just... That's the thing, it's not two-stroke, it's not really leery, it sounds properly, I think it sounds quite tough for such a little bike. I think they've got a great sound to them. Right, I better go and get into some proper motorbike gear. I'm a responsible motorcyclist. I don't ride on the road much, so I've just stalled it. Absolutely love this thing. It's what old vehicles are about, right? They make you smile. You take them out every so often and just escape. Oh, subscribe, yeah, to the channel. Thank you. My gosh, even a Fiat 500 looks massive. That's it. I got my knees round my chin. Oh my word. You realise first gear is so low, it's just like a little crawler gear. Got no indicators, just hand signals, which is why the throttle doesn't return very quickly, just so that you can do hand signals and stuff. Okay, tricky junction for the little monkey. Right, here we go. First. Second. Yeah. Yeah. These, okay, that's on the speedo at least, that's 25 miles an hour. It feels about 60. There's no way that speedo's accurate. That's saying 35. I struggle to believe that. I get the impression that I'm like a little fly that people want to swat out of the way in the wind. The wind is trying to blow me off course when I'm out in these open country roads. Yeah. Big roundabout, small bike. What's the worst that can happen? Let's not answer that. Yeah, okay, here's the fuel station. Time to give it a little drink. Back brake down there, yeah. It's easier to stand up to shift gears, even though it's a centrifugal auto clutch. The number of people already laughing at me. It's called a monkey bike for a reason, it's cheeky. Got to be careful, I don't think it's going to need a great deal of fuel, if I'm honest. Well, that's all it wants. Look, that's all it wants. That is thrifty, classic vehicle fun. £2.38. Let's go and pay.
Is that a little bit small for you?
Yes, it's a little bit small for me. It just looks wrong. Just looks so wrong. Just have to select the gear with my foot. Oh yeah, she's got a tank full of gas. She's ready to kick some ass, well, or not. MOT exempt, tax exempt. Cost me about £80 a year to insure. In fact, it's less than that, I think. I'm wearing the gear because, you know, I don't ride bikes so much these days, and I've got kids. I do fancy an Evel Knievel jacket at some point, but that can come in the future maybe. Put it into second. I actually can't get my foot. That's it. My foot's too big. My legs are too long. It just doesn't quite work. This is the kind of weather that I enjoy. Being out and about. Oh my gosh, look at the size of that. Yeah. There's a child staring at me. So these really took off in a big way when the next version came out, which was the first generation of Z50, which the Z50 model is what we now know. Because confusingly, this is called a CZ100, but it's not 100cc, it's 49, it's 50, class of moped. So when it hit America in '67, and they named it the Mini Trail, that's when these things became massively popular. They're used by youth clubs and campsites and RV owners, camper van owners. And these are called mini bikes in America. But there's only one monkey, and it's the Honda. The reason why Honda started making sporty bikes is purely because Mr. Honda became very fascinated with the TT. The Isle of Man TT is single-handedly responsible for why Honda makes performance motorbikes now. They made the Z50 monkey, which obviously this is the godfather of, up until 2017 when they did a couple of sweet limited editions. I think the last edition was actually fuel injected. I'd love one of those. And they did a 25-year edition. I think the 30-year was gold plated. I nearly bought one of those once. I can see now why Big Mick had a flag and a high backrest on his CZ100, because the feeling of vulnerability is pretty high. These early monkeys, besides being very collectible, the parts, finding original parts, are especially quite hard. And like all classics, the more the originality, the more the desirability. Just as little tank badges, for example, they're are worth a lot of money if they're date original. Yeah. Oh, I got cramp. Oh, I got cramp in my right leg. Oh, I hate cramp. Oh, I hated that. Knee down. I'm just about to go past an Aston Martin, to give you an idea of how much bigger an Aston is than a monkey bike. There. As monkey bikes progressed, of course, they became more and more foldable. This one isn't really foldable. The seat's the same fixed position. The bars you can twist in, take those off. But really, the next gen bike is when things started to fully fold down and you could bring the seat up for adults. But the purity of the monkey lies in this one. Back brake, back brake. Brakes are really good, actually. Not that it's particularly heavy, it's 54 kilos. Which in small bike terms is a lot. Oh no, cobbles. Cobbles on a hardtail and a hard front. Oh man. Oh, it's tricky. It's tricky on the monkey. It's tricky. Oh. Oh, the bumps. Just a small pothole becomes a real problem. Volvo XC90, man, that's a big vehicle. This is a hill start for this bad boy, so first gear, I reckon. This is a small town and it looks absolutely massive when you're on this. These cars look so big. It's like playing Frogger, but with real life. On a tiny bike which people don't realise is worth 10 grand. Okay. I've owned a few Hondas over the years. The last great Honda I owned was the first generation Insight. What a car, what an engineering masterpiece. My gosh, it's a body lifted Defender. I don't want to mess with that. Oh, the wind! Side wind action! Going for VMAX, I reckon. In the wind as well. Terrific side wind. What are we getting? 30, 35? 35. 35! It's happening. 35 miles an hour is happening. Struggles up the hill with an oncoming wind. Oh my gosh, this is full throttle. Second. Somewhere up here is Project Heaven. Beautiful British weather, beautiful. Whoa! Okay. Somewhere in here is my other Honda that's small and red and quite rare. Come on. There it is, the S600 Coupe. This place is really awesome. A bit of everything going on here. Resto mods, motorsport prep, restoration. This is basically Honda's first ever car. So people forget that Honda first started out making sports cars. And then they went into mass-produced normal people's cars. But before the S600 came out, something was launched called the S360, which never actually made production. It was just launched at a motor show back in '63. Then the S500 came out, a very short-lived car, 500cc. And they realised the car was very underpowered for what it would be, a roadster and also a coupe. So they quickly, only about 3 months into development, 4 months into being on sale, they brought the S600 out. Then the S600 became the S800, and if you've heard of any of these cars, the S800 is probably the most popular. But this is a rare little beast. To find one of these that's rot-free, to find one of these at all, I mean, a coupe is a far, far rarer beast than the roadster, and I've always had a fascination for these. Why? Because when these came out in '64, these were up against things like Triumph Spitfires and Austin Healey Sprites. That there is a 4-cylinder, 4-carb, twin overhead cam engine, 606cc, that could put out nearly 60 horsepower and do over 90 miles an hour. This could rev to 10,000 RPM, some say even more. It's basically everything that Soichiro Honda developed in his head for motorbikes and racing and going to the TT, he distilled into a small but seriously sporty car. This would be the start of Honda's domination in the car world, effectively. And I can't believe they ever made money from these. They were developing them so fast and so much complexity. And one of the reasons why I brought it here to Project Heaven is because it's an engine that a lot of people are scared of. It's an engine a lot of people don't want to go near because there's not much knowledge about a Honda S for sports, Honda Sports Series cars. And I wanted to make sure it was done right. This particular car I bought had been imported from South Africa, which is why it's right-hand drive. And that also explains why it's pretty rot-free. I think it came from near Johannesburg, but it was hail damaged. So I had the car bare metaled and repainted in the Honda Racing Red, and by a chap called Walter Crobot at Retro Classica. Lovely bloke Walter is, did a fine job. Then I set about recommissioning the engine because this car hasn't run in decades. It was part of a deceased sale, bereavement sale in South Africa, and the guy collected a lot of stuff, including Honda S-Series cars. You can tell from the styling, it was styled to look, I guess, Italian, very European. I think the front end looks very reminiscent of British cars of that era. And I guess that was because Honda was trying to crack into the Western market, convince people they made quality goods. Because remember, there was a lot of prejudice back then. People didn't think that these sorts of machines were superior to the British bike industry, the British car industry, which were dominant in the 50s and the 60s. But I love this back end. These lovely little circular lights, the fast back styling with the hatch. I think it looks like a little, like, shrunken Ferrari. I really do. I can't wait to drive it. And don't worry, there'll be more videos on this car when it's finished. We're going to take it on a couple of drives, maybe with the bike as well. I've always fancied building a little single-wheel trailer so I can tow the bike with the car. I wanted to get a coupe because I think the coupe looks a bit better, and they made about a third of the coupes compared to the roadsters, so the production figures of the roadsters for the S600s and the S800s is much higher. To see a coupe is rarer. We've got this lovely fuel filler on the side. This is the sort of big, chunky Le Mans style filler flaps that you've got on Aston Martins and Maseratis. There's a Maserati there, look. So this is Pete, and this is Project Heaven, and this is where I decided to bring the S600 because Pete is not afraid of any engines at all, are you?
No, not at all, no.
And I met Pete years ago when I saw that he was building his own. It was that Capri, wasn't it?
Yeah, my Ford Capri, that was my first car.
Capri with a Supra engine.
Yep.
Is that a 2JZ or a
No,
what?
it was a 7M GTE.
Okay.
And it was, I remember I put a much bigger turbo on that off a whole set, it's a whole set HX35 off of an old Cummins lorry engine, from Seaton Scrapyard.
I remember, so they built this thing out of bits of scrap, and it was amazing. It was like Mad Max, but with a level of proper engineering. And then since has set up Project Heaven.
Is this what you turned up on then?
Yeah, I've just ridden this here, yeah.
Oh my God.
It's very windy, as you can hear.
Yeah.
It's windy today.
Yeah, cool, man.
But the reason why I bought this is because they're both 65. You're probably wondering why it's on a pallet. Nobody's stolen the wheels. The back axle of this car is so weirdly complicated. When Honda built the S500 and then the S600, they devised this bizarrely complicated, I guess, they wanted independent back suspension, but they used the prop shaft from the engine to the diff,
Yep.
And then they went to a pair of chain cases.
That's right, yeah.
With
yeah.
4 chains.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
To create independent rear. So quite complex. I mean,
Pretty complex, pretty weird.
Pretty unusual.
But yeah, we like it, yeah, it's good.
Let's go and have a look at the engine. The business end.
That's right.
This is sexy, right?
Yeah, yeah, this is
I mean,
pretty
I know
unusual.
You're an engine man.
Yeah.
And I know that basically the party piece of this car is the weirdness, and for its time, the sort of extreme nature of the engine. 606cc, just under 60 horsepower, in a car that weighs 600 something kilos. And the problem is with these engines is because it's well,
it's highly strung. You can't really bodge it, you know.
No, you can't. It's not like an old plodder. And I was saying before that this, when it came out, compared to its peers, like a Triumph Spitfire or a Austin Healey Sprite. I mean, they're like they're so formulaic and low revving.
Yeah, it's not the same thing.
It's a totally different beast. I mean, it's got 4 carbs, a carb for every piston, double cam.
And also, because of it being needle bearing, it doesn't actually have an oil pressure gauge or an oil pressure light. So that's a bit scary, trying to think, oh, has it got enough oil? But what you actually do, you take that plug out, and you actually check for, it just says in the manual, check for sufficient flow from that plug.
What, as in you're getting a face full of...
You know, you just pull it out and you go, yep, there's oil coming out, good. And then
I've had an oil facial, that's fine, put it back in quick.
Like in this manifold, there's all sorts of drillings and stuff for fuel channels and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And a lot of them have got blocked, so you weren't getting fuel to all the carbs. And the balance pipes were blocked. And
somebody had blasted the carbs really aggressively, media blasted them, which is just a stupid idea.
They were full of grit, you know, took quite a while, had to pull them all apart and rod everything out and ultrasound them again. And then polish them again as well to make them look like they hadn't been blasted so much.
Well, that's the thing. That was whoever did that was a bad idea. I sent the radiator off to be refurbished, managed to get new hoses.
Yeah.
The brake parts, we managed to find most of the brake parts.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you've got, I mean, we haven't even looked, the gearbox. So we haven't quite tested that yet.
No, we don't. That's another question mark, isn't it? The gearbox, like,
That'd be another video.
Do we take a lid off, you know,
another video.
Or not?
I just thought, before we talk more.
Oh yeah.
Let me get my rucksack. Let me get my rucksack, Pete. First, here's a piece of the jigsaw which is very superficial, but probably the rarest bit is an original badge which I got from a guy in the States.
Yeah.
I mean, like, who would have known? I've paid 80 quid for that, but.
Yeah.
I need it.
You do need it.
Then you got something slightly more useful. You got some fuel filters.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Okay, but...
I need the thing these go in, actually, if you've got that.
Yeah, well, let's see. Shall we see? Here's what you've won. That is the thing I keep telling you about, look.
Yep. That's the kiddie.
The Mabuchi, is it FP3? Oh, it's got it written on it.
It's a very weird and interesting pump because it actually has a set of points that run off the cam over there.
Well, that's the thing. I remember when we first started looking at the car, and there's not a great deal of information out there about them.
Yeah.
That's a part of the learning process. It's like, why are there extra points?
Yeah, with no way to time them, sort of thing. It's a bit strange, and then you realise, to actually drive this.
Because I think that lives down there.
It does. It goes in there. Look. There she goes.
Yeah, down there.
Goes like that.
Because this car is so original and it's so rare, I wouldn't want to modify it. I thought I'd just try and find the right one.
Yeah. I'm glad you've got that. It's really important because we got this running, but we used.
You used a colostomy bag.
Yeah, it looks a bit like a colostomy bag.
I came over and had a look at it. You got it running just before Christmas, and it was great to hear it splutter into life for the first time in, I don't know, decades.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on.
Right, ready? Yeah.
Oh, it's alive. Beautiful. But running on a drip, basically a hospital drip.
It was that, yeah. But it's meant for testing motorcycles actually, but yeah, we need the pump really for the fuel pressure, so the fuel pressure's correct.
Yeah, and that's quite critical as well. So next time I come and see you, obviously I know I've got to sniff out a couple more parts, but the next time we do a video, we'll do an update on the car. Theoretically, the engine is on the home straight.
Yeah, I'd say next time we'll have this all running. Hopefully had it on the dyno.
Yeah.
See what power it's putting out, make sure it's all tuned up and that side of it's done.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we'll know what's going on with the gearbox a bit more.
New master cylinder is in.
Yeah, and we've done a bit of paintwork to sort of match the rest.
Yeah, so we're getting there.
Yeah, we're getting there.
We're getting there. I just hope that the axle, we can find all the bits for the axle, and then that the clutch operates as it should.
Yeah, I was just about to say we should look at your axle next, shouldn't we?
Yeah, actually, let's have a quick look at the axle on the bench. I like a car that's rare, and I like the thrill of the chase of finding bits. It's part of the thing I enjoy about classic cars, but this back axle is something.
Yeah, it's pretty quirky, that's
it's
for sure,
just crazy torque.
So these are the cases here where the chains run.
Yeah.
So we've cleaned these all out. These are all full of gunk and muck and bits of bearings.
Were they? Yeah, it didn't look great when you sent me a picture.
And then we've had to make these. These are the guides for the chains. The originals are like a bonded rubber.
Yeah.
They'd all the oil had eaten the rubber and they'd all formed to pieces.
Yeah.
So we've made new ones out of polyurethane in our machine shop. Hard stuff to machine, actually.
I bet it is.
Yeah.
That's what I like about you. If I try and find parts and I just keep drawing a blank, Pete's the yes man. I reckon I can have a go making that. There's the diff. And it goes out to these, what do you call those?
Oh, they're like bearing carriers.
Like a bearing carrier, which then joins into...
This chain case goes there, and there's a bearing here.
Yeah.
It can swivel this way. And then the half shaft goes through here into the diff.
And then the chain
drives there. Wheel, hub, chain, half shaft, diff.
Yes, okay, yeah.
Pivot.
Independent suspension. Yeah. But what's weird is Honda realised, I think, that perhaps this was overly complicated for the car, and I still can't believe they made any money on these cars because of the level of complexity. I think it was a sort of lost leader to try and get the name out into the car world as being a serious player. But they changed the early 800s from this just to a straight axle with 4-link.
Yeah, conventional
and went back to it. So the earlier cars have got this madness going on for the back axle. Okay, well that's really complicated, Pete, and I know you're really loving it. Which is why I'm not working on it in that instance. Absolutely love the interior of this car. It's just like a little, I don't know, like a micro E-Type, I think. Like a tiny little gear shifter, real wood rim steering wheel, with beautiful Honda logo there. And look at the RPM on the tacho. Look at that. What's that? 9.5 to 11 red line. These are revving numbers that we would have never got in the 60s and hardly ever get now with cars, maybe with motorbikes. I think it's a really beautiful little setup. You sit so low, the seats are really shallow. Legroom is an issue for me. We'll talk about that in another video. It's something I hadn't quite planned when I bought the car. But anyway, the good thing is this car has got a really well-preserved original interior. So with a bit of a clean-up, I think it'll be just right. Even the headlining's good. I love it. What a car. What a beautiful thing. This is peak 60s Honda. That bike, this car. Although if you like fast bikes, it's probably not that Honda bike. It's probably another Honda bike. Pete, you're doing really well, thank you.
Thank you, mate, no
I know
worries.
it's a difficult car.
No
but I know you're into
it.
Easy
peasy.
I will be back in a couple of weeks. I'll try and source those other bits. Yeah. But yeah, it's good. It's good to come and sit again.
No worries, mate. Good to see you too.
Yeah, cheers, man.
Safe ride home.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm riding home, aren't I? Listen, guys, thank you so much for subscribing to CarPervert. If you haven't already subscribed, just click it. You don't know what you're going to get. You might get a bit of small bike, you might get a big bit of small car, you might get new car, might get old car, might get electric. Who knows? I'm going to ride home now in the wind.